A man gave his younger brother, whom he hadn't seen for years, a photo of the two of them together. But his brother warned him not to try to curry favor with him now that he was successful. In truth, the man wanted to entrust his 8-year-old daughter to his brother, because he knew he didn't have long to live. His helpless daughter had no one left but her uncle.
Kardeşim yok ki henüz.
The man knew his brother's coldness came from a misunderstanding of him. As young boys, the two brothers had been abused by their stepfather. The older brother promised to run away from home with his younger brother, but he left his brother on the boat and went back home alone. As adults, neither had forgotten their shared dream of becoming violinists. The younger brother, Matthew, had become a famous violin virtuoso, but the older brother, Ali, spent his days with his daughter, Aslam, and a few friends, busking on the streets. The coins people tossed into their hat were their daily bread. Sometimes they also have to evade the pursuit of the police. Ali, weighed down with worries, looked at his innocent daughter. Unable to bear the thought of leaving her, he turned his head away, forcing back the tears that welled up in his eyes. He always told his daughter,
Bir melodidir. Sen yeter ki dinlemesini bil.
Aslam took her father's words to heart, but she never imagined they would be his final words. By the small grave, the tearful girl played a sorrowful tune on her violin. Left all alone, she could only be sent to a children's home. But Aslam refused to leave her own home. She even threw a tantrum and tried to chase the social workers out. Ali's friends advised them to come back later, once the child had calmed down. So the workers offered another solution. The guardianship could be given to the girl's biological uncle. But Ali's friends all knew the brothers didn't get along. Still, to keep Aslam from being taken to a home, they clung to a sliver of hope and went to find Matthew. Matthew hadn't expected the news to come so suddenly, yet he still refused to accept a child he had never met. The truth was, his friends weren't asking him to adopt her. They only wanted Matthew to win guardianship, so that they could take care of Aslam themselves. But Matthew used the excuse of having no time and rejected their request, leaving them all looking at each other speechless. His wife had witnessed everything. She knew Matthew still harbored a grudge against Ali for abandoning him, but that was no reason to refuse to adopt his niece. After all, the child was innocent. Matthew, however, thought his niece would be better off in an orphanage than being looked after by 3 grown men. Besides, he needed time to prepare for an important concert. But his wife reminded him, there are things in this world more important than your music. Like a helpless little girl, Matthew was lost in thought. He opened a drawer and took out a small wooden box. Deep down, he had kept the same photo of the 2 brothers as Ali had. He just would never admit it. Looking at the yellowed old photograph, he couldn't help but sob quietly. In the end, Matthew decided to seek guardianship of his niece. When Aslam met her uncle for the first time, she was happy that she wouldn't have to stay in the orphanage, but even happier that she already knew her father's friends would come for her. Matthew declined an invitation to a thank you dinner, using rehearsal as an excuse. But the children's home told him that to ensure Aslam was in a suitable environment, they would make unannounced visits from time to time. To complete the final transfer of guardianship, a lawyer friend told him the home usually came within a month, and offered to help arrange an early visit. So for now, Matthew had to take his niece home. But Aslam insisted on going back to her own house and refused to come inside. Matthew had no time to indulge her, but his wife welcomed the girl warmly. As a woman, she could connect with the child more easily. They thought Aslam had fallen asleep and given up on leaving, but in the middle of the night, she woke up and took her violin, quietly opened the door. The alarm was triggered and woke Matthew. He thought a burglar had broken in, but when he saw the little girl sitting on the floor, he realized this child's stubbornness was exactly like his own. So the two made a deal. As long as she didn't cause any more trouble, Matthew would take her back home soon. Seeing the girl who had to hold her violin even while sleeping, Matthew cracked a rare smile. The next morning, Aslam was drawn by the sound of a violin. The sight of Matthew playing reminded her of her father, but Matthew coldly shut her out. He truly didn't know how to deal with children. At this moment, his wife received a call from the lawyer, informing her that the home wouldn't agree to a visit anytime soon, but his wife said they had already decided to adopt Aslam. That night, Aslam went with her aunt to her uncle's concert for the first time. She had never been around high society and felt out of place, but with her aunt's company, she soon settled in. Matthew performed passionately on stage. Aslam, in the audience, kept time with her knife and fork. When the applause came, she did what she was used to doing on the street. She held out her hat for tips. Matthew was stunned by her behavior. He couldn't believe his wife had brought her along to make a scene. Soon, a waiter stopped Aslam. Luckily, her aunt came to the rescue in time. A lawyer friend who happened to be at the concert greeted them and brought up the matter of guardianship. Only then did Matthew learn that his wife had made the decision behind his back. When they got home, Matthew blamed his wife for hiding it from him. She explained that she meant well. She didn't want a little girl to have to busk on the streets, but Matthew sneered that she was just filling her own emptiness because the couple couldn't have children. He believed his wife was using Aslam to satisfy her own selfish desires. What he didn't understand was that his wife's so-called emptiness came from her dedication to the family. Born into a distinguished family, she had once been a pianist herself. She had given up playing for Matthew's career. Upset by her husband's ingratitude, she stormed out and left home. Matthew had to take Aslam along to a work meeting. Seeing that she carried a violin, his business partner praised her for being so talented at such a young age. Matthew explained it was just her late father's keepsake.
Evet, çalıyorum.
Matthew scoffed at that. He told her to go somewhere else and not disturb the adults' conversation. During a rehearsal, Matthew prepared to play the first piece he had ever composed. Aslam took out her violin and wanted to play with him, but Matthew made her leave the stage.
Ama senin müsaade değerin yok.
çalmak için sahneye ihtiyacım yok ki zaten.
Aslam packed up her violin. The bustling street was her stage. Her beautiful playing drew tips from passers-by. Meanwhile, striving for perfection in his first composition, Matthew made countless revisions but was never satisfied. Restless, he couldn't focus at all. On one hand, he missed his wife. On the other, watching the little girl who had suddenly entered his life, he thought of his late brother. He had never been able to get over that hurt. But this emotional turmoil sparked inspiration in his music. The deep feelings he couldn't put into words found their outlet in his violin. The next day, Aslam made breakfast, just as she used to do with her father. She spread newspapers across the table, so her uncle could eat breakfast while reading the news. For the first time, Matthew was moved by his thoughtful niece. After eating, he took the piece to his partner for feedback. His partner told him it still lacked emotion, and hoped he would bring a better version to the next rehearsal. With time to spare, Matthew took Aslam to visit her father's friends, who were still busking on the street. After hugging each of them, Aslam asked Matthew to take out his violin and play with them. With familiar melodies and cheerful rhythms, Aslam felt an immense warmth, and for the first time, Matthew got a taste of the life his brother had lived. But just then, the police showed up. Scrambling, they grabbed their things and ran. After escaping the police, Matthew confessed to the men that he planned to take Aslam back to the children's home that night. He felt he couldn't give her a proper family, and the men weren't able to provide her with a good education either. That evening, Matthew drove Aslam to the children's home. Watching his sleeping niece, he was torn once again. After a long struggle in the car, in the end, he couldn't bear to leave her there. The next day, Matthew, who never got up early, made breakfast. It was a dish he and Ali used to make often, but it had been so long that he was out of practice. Busy cooking, Matthew had Aslam answer the phone. He put it on speaker. To his surprise, it was the children's home, because Aslam hadn't been brought back the night before. They wanted to know what had happened. This drove a wedge between the uncle and niece. Young Aslam once again felt the despair of being abandoned. Heartbroken, she went to her father's grave, and played her violin, her face full of sorrow. When Matthew found her, Aslam was still sitting under the tree, playing. Moved by the nameless, plaintive melody, he was deeply touched. He listened for a long time, unwilling to interrupt.
Gerçekten keman çalabiliyor musun?
Demiştim.
Neydi bu çaldığın?
İlmem. Babam öğretsen bilmeli dedi.
Matthew felt the weight of those words deeply. He crouched down beside Aslam, and asked her not to run away again. In that moment of embrace, each of them found an emotional anchor in the other. Then Matthew summoned his courage, and walked into the old house he and his brother had once shared. Even though many years had passed, the memories were still vivid. Tears filled his eyes as he spoke of being abandoned by his brother.
Tek bileti varmış.
What he didn't know was that the pocket money Ali had saved up back then could only buy one boat ticket. He had given his little brother the only chance to escape their suffering. Aslam found a photo album her father had kept. Every page recorded moments from Matthew's life, pictures of him as a child, and clippings from every concert he had given as an adult. Overwhelmed by regret, Matthew realized the truth. But they were already worlds apart. The misunderstanding he had harbored against his brother was a wound he would never have the chance to heal. It is through suffering that a man grows. Matthew found his wife and asked for her forgiveness. He said he now understood. A family cannot exist without love, protection, and sacrifice. A family is a beautiful melody made of many different notes. Seeing her husband return to the man she had once fallen in love with, his wife was deeply moved. But what moved her even more was, Matthew had brought in a musician to play the song from their first date, and the musician was none other than Aslam. Surprise and romance have always been the way to a woman's heart. Matthew planned to perform on stage with his wife. After years away from the piano, she felt both nervous and excited. With the piano added, Matthew's first composition became nearly perfect. But while the couple was rehearsing, something unexpected happened. Aslam suddenly collapsed in the concert hall. Fortunately, after a hospital checkup, they found she was only allergic to nuts. However, the children's home felt that Matthew had failed to meet a basic health need for the child. He had clearly not read the health report's allergy section carefully. Therefore, the home intended to revoke his guardianship. Matthew blamed himself bitterly. But when Aslam woke up, she refused to stop crying unless she could see her uncle. The social workers had no choice. Matthew came with his brother's violin to comfort her. He told her the violin had once been his. His initials were carved on it. Later, his brother had added his own name. And now, Matthew was going to carve Aslam's name on the violin too, because the violin belonged to her now. He also promised to play that very violin at his concert, and vowed to do everything he could to regain guardianship, and stay by her side forever. Though this was not a final goodbye, Aslam cried inconsolably as she was taken back to the home. Matthew could only release his emotions through his music. The long-rehearsed concert was about to begin. Matthew stroked the old violin and lamented that Aslam couldn't be there to see it. His wife reassured him that they would handle the guardianship matter as soon as the concert was over. But 3 minutes before the show began, the children's home called to tell Matthew that Aslam had run away. Worried sick, he immediately lost all desire to perform. He would rather miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, even if it hurt his career, than not go after his niece. In the end, Matthew found Aslam at his brother's grave. After a long, tight embrace, Aslam noticed her uncle was dressed very formally. Hearing from Matthew that the concert was today, she was worried she might have made him miss his performance.
Olsun. Çalmak için sahneye ihtiyacımız yok ki.
because life itself is a stage. Performance is everywhere. Everyone has their own melody, sometimes gentle, sometimes lively, sometimes stormy. By the time they arrived at the concert hall, the performance was nearly over. Matthew took the violin from his partner. Aslam became his new partner. On stage, they played with all their hearts. The music was so beautiful, so moving, it seemed to pierce through time and space. In the joyful music, they found the true meaning of home.